Jesus, man, how long have you been sitting there?
Well, I don't know.
What are you even doing? Isn't there like something you should be working on right now?
I am working on something, actually.
Oh, so you're working on a script for the Need for Speed reboot? How's that coming?
It's still in the research and development phase.
Okay, you know what? You need to get a haircut, clean this place up, and get to work on a review.
Well, where would I even get my haircut?
I don't know, figure it out.
It's been so long since I even shot anything. I don't know where my equipment is, and I don't even know where to find it. And even if I did, I'd have to relearn how to use it. And I'd have to figure out how to... What are you doing?
Why don't you do a video on Disco Elysium? Should be a good subject. I'll hold on to this till you're done.
Well, hey, come on. Fuck. Okay, time to talk about Disco Elysium. I gotta say, this one took me by surprise. Not typically into this kind of game, but, yeah, well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So anyway, this game was made by Zaum, and,
What are you doing? Are you filming the screen with your phone?
What? No, I was just practice.
I'm taking that too. You can have it back when the video's done.
I don't even know where my camera is yet. What a jerk, right? Anyway, let's actually talk about Disco Elysium, the RPG that came seemingly out of left field, at least for me. Most of the time I stick to third-person action-adventure games, which has probably become fairly apparent, but I just heard such good things about Disco that I had to give it a try. For those who don't know, Disco Elysium is an isometric RPG with huge pen and paper influence. You take on the role of the main character, who has drunken himself into such a stupor that he can't even remember his name. But you find out pretty quickly that he's a cop, and he's in Martinez on police business, the hanging right outside the hotel he's staying in. The game sees you investigating and eventually wrapping up the case of who done it, and it's quite a journey, so strap in. All these other games out here trying to be movies, at Disco Elysium is trying to be a book. There's a lot of text in this game. I kind of see it as a text adventure with the added bells and whistles of animations and occasional voice lines. Granted, most text adventures have you come up with your own choices and responses wholesale, whereas this one gives you a finite list of options. But in a lot of cases, they really give you some options, and a majority of them are solid. I could count on one hand the number of times I saw an action or response that I thought was lame or wholly uninteresting. Unlike your standard video game RPG, there are no cutscenes. There's not a single interaction that you don't take part in. The closest thing is probably the various dream sequences at the end of each day, but even then, as confused as you may be, you can still offer up responses. And we're not just talking what, yes, yes, or yes. Almost every conversation has interesting and unique dialogue options for you to choose, and you can go in radically different directions. Not only that, it's all written well. Whether it's a subtle aside or a boisterous show of strength, the game constantly goes the extra mile to keep you interested with its writing alone. Even outside of dialogue, you'll get lots of nice descriptors of the way the air is hitting you, or how your actions physiologically affect you, or how someone's body language betrays their intentions. Even though the game is rendered with buildings, objects, and character models, the text reinforces what you can see and fills in what you can't. The visuals almost aren't necessary, though they're very appreciated for me. This rhetorical fidelity is consistent in all aspects of this game's narrative. There's not really a way to mainline the story, as it were. You're strongly encouraged to explore and engage in as many quests and activities as you can. As a result, everything is on a relatively equal field in terms of quality. The side stuff never feels generic or like an afterthought. Every situation you approach is genuinely interesting on some level. You can just stumble onto something that seems totally innocuous and it can turn out to be a whole huge intricate quest line. Excuse me, sir, it seems you got some...
Listen, I've got something important that needs taken care of.
Looking for a fix? I know the feeling.
No, man, it's my ass. I've got a ton of speed in my ass and I can't get it out. If you can help me get it out, I'll give you some. What do you say?
Well, I think it's about time we change the subject. The writing's good, sure. What about the other stuff? Who plays video games to read? Is there stuff I can look at? Well, yes, in fact there is. So on a basic level, Disco Elysium is an isometric point-and-click RPG. You've got characters moving through a 3D environment with weather effects and changing time of day, all that stuff. On its own, this stuff isn't mind-blowing. This game isn't technically revolutionary. They don't have character models with a billion polygons or big flashy effects, but they've got style out the ass. This world has such a unique quality to it. As down-to-earth and honest as the writing can be, the world rarely feels mundane. Whether it's the excellent art used for items and character portraits, the ambient music that plays throughout your journey, or the very thoughts in your head manifesting themselves to give you advice, there's always something that brings on an air of mysticism. The design and overall setting of the world feels incredibly fleshed out. There are so many interesting, unique details throughout this game that serve to immerse you in this world of Elysium. And that's because this setting has been developed over 10 years as a tabletop RPG that Zaum have played amongst themselves. There's even a book that takes place in Elysium, which will be available in English next year. But getting back to the game, the art really shines with the attributes and thoughts. It's visceral, primal, sort of disturbing on some level. I was a bit put off by it at first, honestly, but as the game went along and my attributes got me out of jams time and time again, I came to have something of a fondness for these images. Just another facet of this unique world. The thoughts, though, yeah, some of those I could do with forgetting. I also want to take a second to praise the way Zaum has implemented the text in this game. First of all, they're pretty clear with the consequences of the choices you make in the game, which ones move the conversation forward, which dice rolls can be retried, which things are spoken versus thought, and so on. But they've also done a really good job of conveying tone with their text, which can be difficult sometimes. How something would sound if it were spoken out loud. One really good example is the use of asterisks. If a particular word needs emphasis, they just slap it with asterisks. It's a small, simple addition, but it adds a lot to the character of the dialogue and general writing. There are several small things like this that work together to turn the text from a flat wall into something with a little more texture. Anyway, a lot of that is static stuff. They've also got some nice animations. Less from a technical quality standpoint, more of a fun, creative one, but they're still pretty great. Whenever you do something stupid, loud, or just very cool, you're rewarded with an equally boisterous animation. Now you're not going to see this stuff all the time. Mostly you'll be seeing standard walking animations and some other basic stuff that gets looped ad nauseum, but that's sort of to be expected from this type of game. All that said, there really are some special visual moments that made me absolutely giddy. Shifting over to the audio, I want to touch on voice acting. I mentioned that it was fairly sparse, and it is. I see it as a tone setter. Most, if not all, characters have a few spoken lines for their introduction, and the remaining dialogue is strictly text, leaving you to fill in their vocal personality from there. I'm of two minds about this. Some characters left a big impression on me, in part because of the vocal performance. I'm gonna remember Kuno for a long time.
Fuck, does Kuno care?
But at the same time, some of the voice acting is rough. Whether it's because some actors sound like they recorded in their apartments, or some actors just really need to hone their acting skills. There are more than a few instances where the voice lines leave something to be desired. There was even one point where a character was making me roll my eyes with every poorly delivered line, and they had a lot of dialogue. So it's a mixed bag, but I would say that the good outweighs the bad here. Overall, the game's presentation is really solid. Its sense of style is impeccable, and it complements the writing really nicely. But this is in fact a video game, so maybe I should talk about how it plays.
What have we got here? Extensive player choice, a well-crafted world to explore, expansive attribute trees, and actions powered by dice rolls. This woman was the unfortunate victim of a classic RPG.
Actually, it was the knife in my back.
Please.
This game isn't my usual bag of chips. The navigation, the camera perspective, the core gameplay itself. If you laid all this stuff out on paper, I wouldn't be jumping out of my seat to play it. But Zaum has done enough of it really well to supersede my bias for action games. Let's start with the basics. The main draw of this game is interacting with characters and objects in the world and deciding what to do or say with them. There are 3 tiers of actions. Standard ones that require nothing more than reading and deciding to say or do the thing, skill checks that give you a certain chance to succeed or fail at doing a thing, and then there are hidden skill checks that only make themselves known if you have a certain attribute leveled sufficiently. These can range from providing a small bit of flavor text to allowing you to take a conversation in a whole new direction. But I never felt paranoid that I was missing out on something crucial because I was missing one of these hidden checks. It was just a pleasant surprise whenever one popped out. There are also thoughts that you can adapt and integrate into yourself. These provide temporary debuffs and then eventually more permanent buffs. There are a lot of thoughts that I haven't yet encountered, but for me they played a pretty similar role to the hidden checks. They just add the occasional extra bit of dialogue or another action for you to take on top of the buffs that are listed with the thought. As far as the standard skill checks, I think their system works really well. I'm not very familiar with many pen and paper RPGs, so this could be a standard that I don't know about. But Disco Elysium has a white check and a red check. The red checks cannot be retried. White checks can be retried. If you fail them, all you have to do is put 1 point into the required attribute. This also gives you an increased chance of succeeding on the next try. I found that there were more white checks than red checks, and the game tries to throw you a bone when you fail, so it's easier to roll with it. That said, I save scummed like a motherfucker in this game. I played through it twice, and my second playthrough was my reckless playthrough where I was going to be a maniac who didn't give a damn about consequences. That went out the window before too long. There's a certain percentage chance that you'll succeed at any given task, and it's really easy to save right before trying anything, so it was tough for me to just let a perfectly good success go out the window. Of course, if you have more self-control, you can play this game more along the lines of how it was probably intended, taking the hits and successes as they come. Part of my obsession with not failing may have come from the opening hours of the game. They're surprisingly punishing, particularly your first major point of interest, the crime scene. Basically, once you step onto the crime scene, you're in a minefield. Instead of a slap on the wrist, the game punishes you with immediate death for a few different interactions. Can't count how many footsteps are on the ground? Fuck you, you died. Nothing you can do about it. Can't open this dumpster? Yeah, that's a death. And this game rarely autosaves, so this teaches you early to save like crazy in case this bullshit gets pulled on you again. And it almost never does. I can think of maybe 1 or 2 times later in the game where this instant death crap happens again. I don't know why it's so front-loaded like this. This also taught me, wrongly, that losing morale meant instant death. I only had 1 point of morale on my first build, so when I went to talk to this character and kept losing my morale no matter what, it frustrated the shit out of me, and I ended up starting a whole new playthrough because I thought I had totally fucked myself. But as I say, outside of this courtyard, this crap rarely happens. There are still a lot of things I wish I had known from the beginning, though. Some things that the game doesn't really bother to tell you, or at least it leaves it to the loading screens to randomly clue you in. For one, you can run. The walking gets kinda tedious after a while, but if you double click, you can run. I didn't know this for a little while until I stumbled upon the tip in a loading screen. But what the game never tells you is that you can turn on caps lock and then you can just run with 1 click. I found that out on playthrough number 2. There are other things like clicking the right mouse button instead of shift to highlight objects, using number keys to select dialogue options, or the fact that there's a fucking help menu up here. But I want to jump back to navigation. I personally wasn't a fan of the point and click approach. I don't see why we don't at least get the option to move with WASD. It just seems awkward to use this method anytime you have to travel more than 15 feet, which is often. The camera never felt like it really zoomed out quite far enough to facilitate this movement style. You can hold the mouse button down to constantly change your destination, another thing the game doesn't tell you, but this still doesn't feel that good to me. And while I'm complaining, I should mention some of the bottlenecking that I ran into. There were a couple points in the game when I just felt stuck. The first issue I had was that time only passes in the game when you're doing something. If you just let the game run while you go off and do something else, no time passes. So basically, I had run out of things that I was willing to do because of the way I was playing my character, and I had to wait until the next day for a path to open up so I would have more things to do. On top of that, the game hadn't made it entirely clear to me exactly how this path would manifest itself, so there was just a lot of frustration and confusion. Then there was another point later on where the only way to proceed is passing one specific skill check. Again, due to the way I was playing and leveling my character, I was nowhere close to being able to pass it. This meant I had to just go do other things, which somehow gave me a higher chance of passing the check later. But to be fair, I did take a bit of a difficult approach the first time around. It's clear from the outset that your character is not very put together. He can't even remember anything because he drank himself into oblivion. I wanted to be a goody two-shoes and take him on a path of total redemption. This is definitely a handicap as far as the gameplay is concerned.
So basically in Disco Elysium, drugs are like investigation fuel. They provide really helpful boosts, and the downside of using them is pretty minimal. Granted, they'll ding your health a bit, but that's a pretty easy fix. Just need something to take the edge off. Basically, if you're not using drugs, you're pissing away free levels. Speaking of which, if you'll excuse me.
Your playthrough seriously benefits from indulging in substance abuse. If you abstain, you essentially miss out on a whole game mechanic and several free stat boosts. Smoking, drinking, snorting, all ways to grease the wheels of investigation. As long as you can heal yourself or otherwise tank the damage, there's pretty much no downside. I would say this game is not for kids, but they probably wouldn't have the patience for all this reading anyway. So I've referenced playing the game twice a few times now. I had a sneaking suspicion that the alternate playstyle would affect my experience pretty strongly. I was right, but I underestimated just how much new stuff I would find on that second playthrough. The fact that time only passes when you do something new encourages you to go and find as many things to do as possible, and even so, you can still miss out on quite a lot, especially if you start to get tunnel vision like I did. Various threads and people that I had completely forgotten about or abandoned were put in front of me again, and like I said before, every story is given equal care and attention. It's not like all that I had left was the boring crap. I still had fucking revelations after already having seen the credits once. Of course, there was a fair amount of stuff that was the same. You gotta progress through the investigation at some point. But even so, approaching those same scenarios with a whole different skill set and a new attitude can make a world of difference. So I would absolutely recommend that you play Disco Elysium at least once, if not twice. I took issue with some of the actual gameplay elements, but this game gets so much right those issues are far overshadowed by its strengths. If you like games with good writing and wish that there were more of them, I can't recommend this game enough. And if you're so inclined, the devs are working on porting it to consoles, but you'll have to wait till 2021 for that. Beyond that, Zaum has some ambitious plans for this franchise. They're already planning out the sequel, and they're also apparently developing a Disco Elysium TV series. If this first game's anything to go by, I can't wait to see what they cook up.
Okay, video's done. I just finished it. Oh. Message from Roman. LOL, still got your PS4. Sucks to suck. See you never. Jeez. P.S. You should check your other messages.
Four.